The latest generation Ford Bronco is one of the most popular vehicles on the road. The off-roading prowess, the style, the removable roof, all have great attributes. But believe it or not, there's 6 reasons why you should not buy one. Let's get into it now. So one of the first major problems that Ford had with the Ford Bronco, unfortunately, is the engine. Now, there's 3 major engine configurations you can get in the Bronco. You can get this base 2.3 liter turbo 4-cylinder engine. It's an EcoBoost. You could also step it up to a 2.7 liter twin turbo V6 EcoBoost, or as well the 3 liter EcoBoost, which you'll find in the Raptor with over 400 ponies. The 2.7 gives you 330 horse, and this one gives you 300 horsepower. So there's a place in the market for each and every one of them. Now, the 2.3 liter engine like this hasn't had an excessive amount of problems. Not like the old 1.5 liter we've seen in the EcoSport. Yikes, that's a mess. But there have been issues, and the main problematic engine is the 2.7. Now, cam phasers, cam lobes are an issue, lifters are an issue, but more importantly now what they're finding out, the supplier for the intake valves for the 2.7 liter engine, but not exclusively to the one of these vehicles, the Bronco, but also the F-150 and Explorers that use that same 2.7 liter engine, had problematic intake valves, and the head would come off in the combustion chamber. 6,000 RPM. Could you imagine when the valve head comes off? That generally is catastrophic failure. Now, if it's just a minor issue that you saw, cam phaser issues, timing problems, would generally reduce performance, generally reduce the economy, generally reduce the power and performance overall, but ultimately it was a slow degradation. Generally speaking, there were some issues with that 2.7 liter engine. Those, however, were the early motors. Now, what we're hearing more often than not from more recent engines are having a lot better success. The 3 liter engines are having better success. The 2.3s aren't particularly terrible either. And so what we're finding is certain generations, certain serial numbers of the 2.7s and certain engines throughout across the board are having problems. That said, tell me any manufacturer that isn't having some kind of engine problems these days. Even Toyota, they can't get their V6s right these days. And many other manufacturers are struggling with engine issues. Recalls everywhere. The second problem with one of these Ford Broncos is cheapness. I mean, we can begin and end with the engine, but look at the engine overall. We know there's been some troubles with the engine, but there's also no engine plastics. Most car manufacturers are dressing up the engines with extra hardware, extra plastic to cover all the piping and the hoses, just to dress it up a little bit. Well, there's cost cutting there, but that's just the beginning. Now, of course, lots of plastic. And when I mean plastic, I mean hard plastic. Now, a lot of brands are using a lot of hard plastics, and especially on the exterior of a vehicle, that works. But, I mean, how about this mirror? Here's an example, a breakaway mirror. Look, I pull on this gently. Now, I know it's meant to flip in and flip out, but most car brands don't have this amount of give and slop right in the joint there. This feels cheap. Lots of cheap plastics located throughout. As well, if you look under there, cost cutting. When I can see welds along the chassis from the outside, I'm not impressed. I don't want to see welds. There's too much exposed metal here, and it looks like it needs some parts. So again, cost cutting. Now, I realize that this particular model, Big Bend, and certain lower trim level vehicles are going to have some cost cutting measures, but it just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Now we took another further look in here, cost cutting in here. Let's flip this up. Okay, overall not terrible, but again, look at the third brake light. This doesn't look all that well put together. It's quite flimsy if you're asking me. Then we look in here, an excessive amounts of plastic. It feels like a tackle box if we're being honest, or it feels like Fisher-Price got their way. Look at the play and the movement in this. I mean, there's lots of plastic. Though plastic wears well, it doesn't look like it's put together particularly well. Look at all these moving parts right there. That's problematic. Lots of parts, electrical fittings shouldn't be shown like this. Things should be better hidden, to be honest. There's a lot of cost cuttings. Now also cheapness. Lots of hard plastic everywhere can be found. Let's pull that open. And when you look in here, you can see more welds. Why am I looking at welds here? See, to me, that does not inspire a lot of confidence. Just take a look at that. Why do we have to look at welds? Shouldn't there be some kind of a gasket there? Normally on most vehicles, you have a double layer of gasket, something like this. But it feels to me like we're missing something. Now, the fabric isn't particularly bad. Actually, it's quite nice. Actually, I generally don't mind it. You have this sort of denim look in here. You can upgrade to leather. But again, lots of this plastic that you see doesn't seem like it's holding up all that well. lots more plastic here. The buttons, they don't feel like they're all that well put together. And even when we look down in here, I mean, just look at these. Okay, look at the flimsiness on this thing. This just has a nice twist to it. It just feels really, really cheap. Almost like the packaging your TV came in, you know, the parts that you throw out. It's very, very thin, quite flimsy, and the same storyline goes for this side as well. Not a really, really well put together in terms of lots of plastic throughout. The front seat as well. Again, so much plastic, fantastic. Now, there are some nice parts. The tactile parts, there's door handles, rubber. These here are nice brushed aluminum. So there are some nice updates. And if you trim level up, you do get some nicer parts. You get a softer rubberized type feel there. In some parts, you'll have some leather touch in certain areas, leather seats. And so if you up the trim level, you can get a much nicer vehicle. But the lower trim levels definitely feels like Fisher-Price got their way. Now as well, look at the movement in this. Look at the movement in this piece. Like, this looks cheap. Look at how it separates itself from that rubber fitting right there. See, lots of cheapness there. Also up here, look at this. Look at the movement in this piece, in this bulkhead. That doesn't look all that well put together now, does it? There is an overwhelming sense of cheapness in the vehicle, and sadly, I think when you get into these vehicles, that's one of the things that jumps out at you immediately. Now, another source of some of the issues with the Broncos are the transmissions. Now, there's 2 transmissions available. You can get the 7-speed manual gearbox. That's great. 3 pedals. Everybody likes to roll their own gears, right? You can get that in only the base model, the base trim, of course, with this 2.3-liter engine. But with the manual transmission, there has been a known issue with what they call scraping. Scraping at temperatures below about 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, allegedly, where internally the vehicle or the transmission starts to eat itself alive internally. Now, allegedly, there's been some problems with those transmissions failing catastrophically. And even with the crawl mode, it was a legendary transmission. The idea give you an ultra low gear to climb up really steep inclines. It seems like a great idea, but unfortunately, the way that transmission was built, it created some problems and it started to consume itself. But it's not just the 7-speed manual gearbox that's the issue. There's also a 10-speed auto that this vehicle here has right here. And the latest word on the street is some of the transmissions with these 10-speed autos have been a little problematic. There have been some catastrophic failures, not a lot of them, but there have been some. Certainly, the big issue is the parking pawl. And so the parking pawl, or the parking hardware, is one in which when you engage the vehicle into park position, like it is right now, there's a piece of hardware that locks in the vehicle so it doesn't move. Well, that piece wasn't installed or not installed correctly, allegedly, and that vehicle would not engage park properly. So some vehicles were known to potentially roll away. Other than that, there were some problematic transmissions with lurching, overall, and even catastrophically failing in some small numbers. And the numbers of transmission failures is actually relatively low. It's just to be noted that there were some problems and something to be watching out for. If you decide to actually buy one of these Broncos, that you should know and do your research on VIN numbers and understand where the recalls, where the complaints are at, and check NHTSA, the website there. You can either look at the year, make, and model, or even just go by the VIN number and check what's outstanding complaints and issues and problems that customers are having, as well as outstanding recalls and bulletins. If you're liking the video so far, you're gonna love the rest of the channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and don't forget the notifications bell so you know when the next amazing video is coming. Another problem with these vehicles is actually somewhat forgivable in the sense that it's got a removable roof, and a lot of people love that. The idea that you can remove either just the front section, front and mid, or even just the entire roof altogether allows you to open motoring, especially if you live in places like California and Florida where you're able to enjoy the sun all day long. So it's nice to be able to pull the roof off there. But unfortunately, whenever that happens and you go to remove that roof, there is a possibility of it not going on properly again. As a matter of fact, there have been many reports of people that actually only have a few miles on their vehicle and already there's leaks. That's right. When you look at here, you've got all kinds of very intricate gaskets. There's all kinds of the seal all the way along. And any one of these spots has a high possibility of leaking. There's a great possibility of this letting water in where you don't want it to go. We know the Wrangler by Jeep is another vehicle that uses a removable hardtop, and Jeeps have also been known to let water in from time to time. But unfortunately, when you're spending the kind of money you do on these vehicles, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, and even in some cases for the Raptor, you can spend well in excess of 100 grand. the expectation is it's not letting water in. That said, when you look inside here, it's these gaskets there can actually just let water in, and they have not necessarily been holding out water as well as they should. In fact, so much so that, look, they even go and put water gasketing, these fittings that leave water out of your plugins, because you see these rubber knobbies right here, and these buttons are sealed in a watertight fitting, and a lot of the fittings feel very rubbery and possibly are designed to resist water. So that would almost suggest that the expectation is that this vehicle could be introduced to water and mud. That being said, not everybody's doing the hardcore off-roading, and not everybody wants to have water dripping down the sides of the windows or dripping on their lap, or coming out after a rainstorm and finding water on their seat. Remember those old German and British cars from back in the 60s and 70s that they would leak like a sieve, and then next thing you know, you'd have this big water spot here, and then you'd have to go and sit and ride on that seat, and your pants would be all wet like that. Nobody wants to be doing that in modern days. These designs should be much better than that, but leaks have been a major problem area for a lot of these vehicles, and it's not just the hard top, but the soft top as well. Now, when we buy a new vehicle, the expectation is it's sorted out. It's built, it's designed, and it should be ready to go. But unfortunately, Ford has had more than their share of recalls. Many people would go as far and call them the recall king, but there have been many recalls for these Ford Broncos. Down in the lower control arm section in the front suspension, there's some fasteners that weren't allegedly done up properly, and that does impact a small number of 2024 and 2025 model years. That's one issue. Fasteners, bolts coming undone, another issue. Cover back here, this glass wasn't installed properly, and in some cases has the possibility of falling off. Apparently there's also been problems with the fastening of the seat belt, the anchoring, and they maybe haven't been put together and also had to be checked and validated. So there's been many recalls, and some of the other recalls are related to the engine and transmission. The engine, of course, there's talks with the 2.7 liter intake valves, again already mentioned, that they could fracture and lose the heads. So that is in fact a recall. So there have been numerous recalls, whether it's suspension, bodywork, of course even transmission and beyond. Unfortunately, the recalls themselves are just enough to turn some people off. And another reason why many people should not buy these vehicles comes down to the practicality. Firstly, they don't have an excessively large tow capacity. With about 3,500 pounds, you're not towing much more than maybe your lawnmower. Unfortunately, look at the ride height. The ride height makes it very difficult to get in. And for anybody who's maybe not as tall, getting into one of these vehicles is extremely difficult for some people. So it's not practical. It's heavier on fuel. It can't tow much. It's not necessarily the best daily driver that you can possibly imagine. But guess what? That sixth reason of impracticality is the exact reason I would buy these vehicles. As a matter of fact, I personally love these Ford Broncos. Call me nuts, but the fact is they're unique, they're different, they're fun. The roof comes off, they can go off-roading. They have a cool factor that very few vehicles on the road have. And I'm sorry, I'm a glutton for punishment, and sometimes you've just got to have some fun. Just driving something fun, and just a little bit of that guilt pleasure has to sneak in from time to time. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'd probably rather have one of these than the Jeep Wrangler, which I have no intention on buying, but these vehicles here, I absolutely adore them. I've done reviews on them recently, and I love the way they drive, the style, the looks. They are such a charming vehicle. That's why many people shouldn't buy a Ford Bronco, but many should. And with all of that said, right there, yes, some of the worst joke vehicles that should never have made it to production. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. We'll see you all real soon. Bye-bye.